Now, David Cameron, leader of the Conservative Party, was an early bird this morning. He was on television just after 7 talking about proposals to give parents an internet forum to complain about their concerns over the sexualisation of young girls. It follows hot on his policy for turning public services into cooperatives, run along the lines of the Co-op or John Lewis. Then there was the party's refusal to take part in a conference organised by Labour about how to pay for care of the elderly. And, of course, the controversy about the posters saying, "Rip off, don't vote for Labour's new death tax." And at the beginning of the week, the Shadow Business Secretary, Ken Clarke, said budget cuts would have to be more fierce than any he'd seen in his political career. So, David Cameron, welcome. Now, we read this morning that you've told Shortlist magazine, aimed at young men, that you're an ordinary bloke who loves darts, Guinness and spooks. So how would you describe yourself to appeal to women?
Well, I think, if my wife is anything to go by, lots of women like watching spooks as well. What I would say is, I don't think that women and men vote on entirely different issues. I think as we come into this general election, I think a lot of people take the view that we need change, that we shouldn't have another 5 years of Gordon Brown in this government. I think there are two things maybe particularly that will appeal to women voters. Is this level of debt we currently have, and this huge amount of wasteful spending and the debts we're building up for our children, and the need to get to grips with the deficit. I think people understand that. And secondly, all the things I've been saying about needing more responsibility in our society. That, yes, of course, we want to sort out the economy, but that's for a bigger and nobler purpose, which is to build a stronger and more cohesive and richer society. And I think people do see that, whether it's crime levels or antisocial behaviour or family breakdown, they do see that there is a lot wrong with our society that we need to strengthen and put right.
Well, let's look at some of the proposals. The public sector cooperatives. Why are you embracing a traditionally socialist idea?
Because I believe in giving people more power and control over their lives. I think if you look at almost any policy I've been putting forward as Conservative leader for the last 4.5 years, it's all about saying there is such a thing as society. It's just not the same thing as the state. Let's give people more power and control over their lives. Let's give them greater choice of schools and hospitals. Let's allow them to own their own homes, have a stake in the business they work for. And why not expand that into the public sector and say that if, for instance, a group of district nurses want to run their own district nurse service as a cooperative, why not allow them to do that? I think often if you give people, particularly in the public sector, more power and control over their lives, they'll run a better service, they'll do it more cost effectively, they'll get more job satisfaction, they will give their customers a better service.
There have been suggestions, though, and you were criticised by Gordon Brown for dreaming up your inheritance tax plans on the playing fields of Eton, which I'm sure haunts you. And there have been suggestions that somehow you're trying to quash that posh image with these kind of ideas. How hard do you have to try and quash that image?
I don't do things to quash any image. I do things because I think they're right. I think that getting our public services to run more effectively and more efficiently is vitally important. We all know, let's be frank about it, as we go into this election, there isn't any money left. The government's run out of money. So we should be all, as politicians, thinking, how can we make things work better without spending more money?
We do get a bit confused, though, sometimes about the things you say. Last month, you admitted that you'd messed up on tax policy for married couples. There's been a problem with crime figures, and there was a misplaced decimal point on teenage pregnancy statistics. Why are these gaffes happening?
Look, I think, like any political party, like anyone, mistakes get made. It's very regrettable when they do, and I think the most important thing when you get something wrong is immediately to come out and explain that and to put that behind you. And that's what we've done. I accept, particularly with... I took responsibility on the marriage thing straight away. I misdescribed the policy. I got it wrong.
So where are you on marriage now?
But very clear. We believe you should recognise marriage in the tax system. That's something other European countries do. I think we should do it here. That would be done within a parliament. That would definitely happen. Why do I think it's important to sort of stand back from it? Well, I think we need a society that recognises and celebrates commitment. And marriage is an important
So do you
form.
see those families who cohabit or lone parents as having second-class status, as Labour has suggested?
No, I don't see that at all. And actually, if you take our policies as a whole, we're talking about encouraging commitment across the piece. Right now, if you are a couple, whether you're married or not, if you're a couple with young children and you separate, the state actually encourages you to do that through the through the tax credit system, through the benefit system. And we've made the pledge of wanting to get rid of the couple penalty in the benefit system, which would actually lift a lot of children out of poverty and would help reward couples that want to stay together and do the right thing. So, right across, we're saying families are vital, commitment is important. This doesn't mean anyone is second class or anything like that, but at the moment we have a tax system that doesn't recognise marriage, and we have a benefit system that actually recognises any form of cohabitation and then penalises it. And I think if we want to build a stronger society, we should have a tax and a benefit system that send out some positive messages rather than the negative ones.
You have been very radical about calling this a broken society. So what do you say to the young single mother who hears you say you're part of a broken society, to persuade her to vote for you?
That I want to help single mothers with the incredibly important and very difficult work they do in bringing up their children. I mean, I'm married. We've got 2 children. It's extremely hard work. It's half term at the moment. We're all, looking after our children more than usual because they're not at school. It's very testing, and single mums do an amazing job, and they need help. And one of the things we put absolutely up front is this need to expand the health visitor network, because I think if you ask yourself what public service most helps young mums when the child first arrives to make sure they access all the best services and they get all the things they need, it's health visitors.
And what benefits is she going to get?
Well, in terms of the single mothers get benefits now, and they won't suffer at all from our proposal of ending the couple penalty. We'll continue those single parent benefits, and they'll get extra benefit from the health visitor programme. We've also, although we say you've got to make cuts in some departments, and we've got to get on with that straight away, we've made an exception of the NHS, which is a service that mothers and single mothers rely on perhaps more than any other.
So if you're so supportive of cohabitees and single mothers, why appear to elevate marriage?
Because I think marriage is a good institution. I think that we should recognise it in the tax system. Almost every other country in Europe does this. And I would put the question around the other way. Why do we think in this country, where we have such a high level of family breakdown, where we have such problems of dissatisfied and unhappy children, according to UNICEF, the worst place to bring up children in the developed world, why do we think we're so uniquely clever in not recognising marriage in the tax system? I think it's wrong, so I think we should.
Now, social care for the elderly has now rocketed to the top of the political agenda. We remember you saying, you actually said it on this programme, that you wanted to change Punch and Judy politics. So why not take up Labour's offer of a conference to try and reach consensus on so difficult a subject?
Well, where there can be consensus, there should be consensus. And there are many issues where I've worked together with Labour to try and produce a good outcome. We've done that over education policy and defence policy and parts of health policy. But the fact is, here in the issue of care for the elderly, there is quite a big difference between us. We have said that whatever we do, there are 2 things we mustn't do. First of all, we should not get rid of disability living allowance and attendance allowance. They're 2 successful benefits that put money in people's pockets, and we don't want to change that. The second thing is, we oppose any compulsory levy, the idea of levying a sort of death tax on families.
But
we
you
think
suggested an insurance policy of £8,000
that's different. I'll come on to
on
that.
retirement. How many people can afford that?
That's voluntary. I'll explain that absolutely. But we think you should rule out the changes to the benefits and rule out the compulsory levy. Labour don't. And I asked the Prime Minister 3 times at Prime Minister's Questions whether he wanted to rule out this compulsory levy, and he didn't. Now, our proposal, which is a voluntary proposal, is that if you are worried about having to sell your home to pay for your care, if you're worried about having to run down your savings, there ought to be something to put that worry to one side. So if age 65 you put aside £8,000, under our proposal you wouldn't have to sell your home.
But you don't have to sell your home if you pay £20,000 out of it after you're dead. What's wrong with that?
Well, that's a compulsory levy, and we think this should be a voluntary idea. So under our scheme, no one has to put aside the £8,000, but if you are worried about having to sell your home for care, you can.